Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and we are back with Migration. And nighttime. I don't know how it is that my luck is always to log in to do a video when it's nighttime. Maybe that's just the way Entropia Universe likes my videos. It likes me night hunting. Now, to be fair, this is kind of a desert terrain thing, and I'm a cold weather person, so deserts get cold at night. Maybe it's just saying, hey, you know, you're not in the snow, so here's some cooler temperatures for you in game. And I'm like, thanks, Mindark, but I can't feel the temperature in the game. Oh, anyway, before we get too far in, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We're on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you'll get exclusive content, like my reading and commentary of Miles and the Night, which was written by Craig Cohen. I hope I credited him properly in that video, but I'll make sure on the Patreon that it's credited properly. A fantastic story that I do a reading and commentary, a running commentary on as I go through it. It really helped shape my path in the last 6 months or so. I have a friend who has kind of been, it's not a formalized mentorship, but he's been mentoring me in some ways. And when I was having difficulty, he introduced me to this particular story, and it kind of put my brain back in order. And so I wanted to share it with my patrons, and you can find it on my Patreon if you become a member. But there's a particular line in here that I want to share with you. And what happens is Miles is a squire, and he walks with his knight Sir Veritas, and as they're walking, he comes upon another squire who is chopping his way through the forest, even though there is a path nearby. And he goes, Sir Knight, Miles says to Veritas, Sir Knight, why didn't you show the path to the other man? And the old knight sighs and replies, he never asked. Now, that really got me to thinking. Because there's a couple things that go into this, right? The first is the old biblical line, and it's in several places, so I'm not going to do a direct quote, but it's if you ask, you shall receive, right? It's like sometimes the biggest barrier to achieving what you want is you simply don't ask. And this story is a perfect admonition to, you know, if you want something, ask. Ask. They might tell you no. But if you don't ask at all, it's definitely a no. One of my favorite Twitter personalities, Josie, said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And she's right. And so it made me think about other things and like, okay, what have I done? Or what things have I wanted that I may not have received or may not have achieved simply because I failed to ask the question? And it occurs to me there's probably a lot. Because oftentimes we're scared to ask, or we think it's inappropriate to ask. And in fact, that right there is probably the most important one. Like, I'm a Freemason, and one of our mottos is to be one, ask one. But no one knows to ask. And rumors, like, I spent a decade wanting to become a Freemason, thinking that you had to be invited. And that's not the case. I mean, there are certain qualifications and there are rules. But the first step is to just ask. And I learned this by speaking to a Mason who is a good friend of mine. And And he asked, have you ever thought about becoming a Mason? And I'm like, yeah, but I thought you had to be invited. He's like, no, you just have to ask. I'll get you a petition. And so for 10 years, that's how I thought it was. And that's not the case. Similarly, as I was a fencer and I was learning how to become a better fencer, I was a cord to a black tiger who would eventually become my Don, or mentor. And throughout the whole thing, we're discussing me becoming his cadet after I earned my scarf. And he goes, one major test at a time. But as it came up, I was leaving the area and in all likelihood would not have the opportunity to get my scarf for several years. And which it happened to be the case. That was exactly the case. And so before I left, I came to him and I said, I am leaving and I understand that this will be merely symbolic. However, I have worked hard under your tutelage, and I am asking you to be your cadet. And that turned out to be basically what he was. He wanted a little more explanation, because the act of becoming a cadet in this context is to strive to make it to the next level, which at that time was to a group that is no longer accepting new people. But cadets are also seeking the highest order in that organization, which is Master of Defense. And so he's like, well, you stated that you're not seeking to become a Master of Defense. You won't turn it down, but you're not seeking it because there's more to becoming a Master of Defense than just sword skills. You have to have you have to have the personality for it. You have to have what peer-like qualities is what they call them. You have to be polite. You have to be internally politically savvy. You have to be able to talk to the right people. You have to be able to deal with new people all the time, very friendly. I mean, it's not an easy group of things to learn. And there's a lot of them. And in my opinion, besides the fact that I sometimes allow my mouth to get out of control, something I am working on. I am working on it. I am not proud of that fact, but it's true. Once or twice I have drunk texted the wrong person with a complaint. No, nothing relationship, like in the organization about an organizational issue. I'll be like, hey, this person isn't doing X. And they're like, dude, wrong person to be texting. But so yeah, I don't foresee ever making it quite that far. And he's like, well, if that's the case, then this could. I'm like, no, this is the reason why. I want to show, I value this mentorship, and now that this mentorship is for all intents and purposes over, I want some symbol of that mentorship. And he's like, okay, that I can get behind, and therefore I will take you on. And so, it was because I asked. And I wonder if I had asked beforehand, like if I had really asked, because there were a few people I would have loved to be cadetted to, including the one that ended up being my Don, but there were several people who I was really interested in being a cadet to. And I have to wonder, if I had just asked the question, would I have been a cadet a lot sooner? And I don't have the answer to that. Now, if it had not been this particular person, I probably would have walked an entirely different fencing path. I may not be as good as I am today, or I might be better. There's no way to know for sure. And I don't have the ability to send my fingers out into the timelines, alternate timelines, and see what direction those particular timelines would have led me. As it happens, I am pretty sure I live in the stupidest possible timeline, but y'all are here with me, so there you go. But it really kind of pushes that whole thing, didn't ask. And I think there's a good reason that people don't ask. They don't ask the question. One, they don't want to look a fool. people hate looking stupid. And people hate being told no. But the fact of the matter is, if you never ask, the answer is still no. And maybe the question is dumb, or you're made to feel dumb for asking it. But sometimes it's better to ask a foolish question than to make a foolish assumption. So how do you ask? And that's the big question, right? How do you ask the question? Because on a lot of these things, it takes a lot of courage to ask the question. And the most common one I think people run into is in romantic life, right? It's asking, and I can only come at this from a male perspective, so I'm going to use the example of asking the girl out, right? And that is a very difficult thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do because you can get turned down. You can get turned down and it can ruin a friendship. Or perhaps she will then feel uncomfortable around you going forward in the future because she knows you have a romantic interest in you. Or you know she knows you have a romantic interest in her. Let me say that correctly. It could be that I mean, any number of things could change by asking the question. You go to a teacher. The teacher doesn't have the ability to take you on as a student for one reason or another. Maybe they think that your personalities aren't compatible. Maybe they think that you aren't ready to be taken on for the type of things that they teach. And it may not be obvious that that's the case. And they might try to explain it to you and do so poorly. Because guess what, boys and girls? Teachers are people too. You know, I have had people that I have tried to teach that I have quickly realized I am not the correct teacher for. And I have had to recommend that they find a different teacher. Or I have brought them to someone and said, hey, would you please work with this particular person? I think that they have the potential to be really good, but I am unable to teach them. And a good teacher will do that. Like if they say, look, I'm not really the right teacher for you. A good teacher will say, I think with a network, like if they say, and I don't know someone who can, there's one of two options. One, they truly don't know someone who can, or two, they just don't want to be bothered. More often than not, a good teacher, it'll be the former, but there are a lot of bad ones out there. I mean, let's be facing it. And I'm not talking school teacher, I'm just talking teacher of a skill, right? Or it might be that their skill set is so rare that it's hard to find someone else. And in a lot of cases, that is specifically the case. Like I'm fortunate enough to know several blacksmiths. Blacksmithing is not a common skill anymore. I know at least one of them, were I to ask him to teach me, it would be a bad fit. And if I was younger and not as savvy at such things, I might ask him to teach me. And a good teacher would say, I am a bad fit for you, but I know this other gentle over here who can help you. And that's actually what happened to me in a lot of ways. I was heavily implying to this one particular Don that I wanted to be his student, and he hadn't taken any students on yet. And he had very specific criteria for what he was looking for in his first student. And I think I can't even surmise to understand why he had such criteria, but we all have our criteria. You know, I don't begrudge him for it. And finally, he caught on to what I was trying to say because I didn't know you could just ask. I thought it had to be offered. And he's like, you know what? And I said, I need a teacher. I said, do you know someone? Because I'm like, okay, obviously this guy's not interested in teaching me, but I need a teacher, and he's the best person I know. I'll ask him if there is someone he knows. And I'm like, I'm at the point now where I'm teaching other people, but I've hit a plateau. And to get over the plateau, I need a teacher. Someone to teach me, to show me where the plateau is blocking me so I can continue climbing up the ladder. And he goes, okay, this is a problem I can solve. You know, I can't teach you, but I can find you someone who can. And so the gentleman's name is Piero, Master Piero now. He was Don Piero at the time. And he goes, I don't have the ability to teach you, but this person, Don Martin, can. And he introduced me to Don Martin, and that's how I ended up becoming a student to and cord to Don Martin. And there's a difference between cord and cadet, and I'm not going to get into that here. And that's how I started learning the style of fencing I do. And within a very short amount of time, I started to climb past the plateau I had hit. Now, unfortunately, with COVID, all of us have regressed. Like, I went to a practice 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, last week I had a meeting, I wasn't able to go. And this weekend, I'm really hoping the weather holds out, is good to us tomorrow so I can practice again. But this last practice, everyone was throwing slop. Everyone was throwing slop, which was totally expected, right? But it means that I might have slid back past that plateau. My hope is that as I get back into it, that plateau does not stop me again. You know, hopefully the vegetation in the woods has not grown back up and it's in the way and I can just push my way through. Or not so much that I can't push my way through. But there's going to be a learning curve. Now, the benefit is there is a certain amount of equalization that this creates. Because no one's been able to do the thing, everyone has lost ground on the thing. And sometimes people who are further ahead lose more ground relative to where they were than the people who aren't there yet. Because there's more to lose. So it's kind of an equalizer. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. It provides opportunities, to be sure. But the thing about the Pareto curve, and this is how life works. Everything's on a Pareto curve, and go look up the Pareto principle if you haven't yet. I only talk about it every other video. Is that the people who climb the Pareto curve often drag people up with them. So long as those people meet certain minimum criteria, and 9 times out of 10, the only criteria is that they ask. You know, it's funny. I have been quibbling over an opportunity because the Don I had is 2,000 miles away and is no longer with the organization I fence with. He fences elsewhere, and he provides advice where he can, but it's really hard when you're 2,000 miles away to provide advice. So there is a Don in my area who I am in conversations with. The gentleman introduced me to Miles in the night, and we have discussed things. And the formal question on either end has not been asked. But as I go through this video, I have to think. It's like, I know for a fact I'm going to run into things where I am going to need that kind of guidance. The question is this person a teacher that is compatible with the way I need to be taught? Are our personalities compatible? There are a lot of questions that need to be answered that I don't necessarily have the answers to. And this has nothing to do with whether he's a good person or not. He's a great person. You know, I have several good and long discussions. In fact, we have to schedule our conversations because if there is a phone call, it's 2 hours that's just you write off the next 2 to 3 hours. That's just the way it goes, you know? And I really like having people in my life where I can do that. It's like, okay, we are sitting down to have a conversation, and if we're not done in 3 hours, we might have to stop. But I guess it comes down to is what is it I'm looking for? Just like when you're looking to learn a skill, what is it you're looking for? And so, in the end, knowing this gentleman's personality, I will have to ask the question. He offered the conversation, but I will have to ask the question. And I have been vacillating over this for months. What things do you seek that you don't have, possibly because you just have been too afraid to ask the question? Is there a person of your preferred interest out there? Are you looking for a student-teacher relationship? Do you want to ask your spouse about buying a home? Or maybe selling your home? Moving across the country? Moving to a different country? I know some of these sound mundane, but a lot of people will sit there wishing they had just contemplated all of these different options. And the only reason, and for some of them, the only reason it doesn't happen is because no one asks. That's... Wow, I didn't really think of that quite that deeply before. This is why I love doing these videos. Like, part of the reason I love being a YouTuber, even though I struggle to get follow or subscribers, even though it's a slow grind, is because it helps me to work out the things in my own head about my own philosophy, and I get the commentary from all of you. I find that to be really amazing. I really appreciate each and every one of you for it. Who knows what'll happen in the future? Maybe I'll give you an update when I make a final decision. Oh, good Lord. I actually recently had a comment that said, I'm really happy you don't harp on gameplay all the time. You talk about other things while playing Entropia. And I appreciated that, because Entropia is a fantastic game. Hands down, probably, if it's not number one, it's in the top 3 favorite games of all times that I have, okay? It really is. It's why I play it all the time. But it's not mechanically deep by any stretch of the imagination. And I could talk about markets all the time, and I would probably really enjoy talking about markets, but you'd all be asleep by the time I'm halfway through, as was evidenced by my students when I was guest lecturing at United Tribes Technical College a few years back. Get myself out of the herd. But I find this to be a wonderful medium to just discuss life topics. Now, that's why I did the podcast the way I did, which unfortunately turned out to be kind of a bomb. But that's okay. I learned something new. I gave it a shot. And sometimes things don't work out. And maybe part of the reason it didn't work out is I just chose the wrong place to do it. Maybe if I can free up the time if I stop having helium hand, which is the active, every time someone says I need help and you raise your hand, that's helium hand. I'll have the time to reinstitute the podcast. But for the moment, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. As always, I really appreciate the support. Consider becoming a patron, and we can see you in the next one.